All right, so let's get back to the spinal cord itself again. A little more about how it interacts with the rest of the body through the periphery rather than the internal details of the arrangements of tissues. And so let's look back at spinal nerves, redefine what a nerve is. Remember, it's composed of axons that are surrounded by connective tissue, much in the same way that muscles are bundled together by the different layers of connective tissue. We're going to be looking at spinal nerves, which are a type of nerve called a mixed nerve that has both sensory fibers coursing to it, so they're bringing information from the body into the spinal cord. And then what's also part of a spinal nerve is the motor portion that takes information out of the central nervous system to an effector, such as a skeletal muscle. The 31 spinal cord segments, a little bit on the numbering, it's based on where the spinal nerves originate. It's the position of spinal segment, right? And these change as you age. They can change position and shift and so forth. The cervical nerves are named for the inferior vertebrae, right? So C1, remember, emerges between the skull and the C1 vertebra, or the the atlas. And those are the ones and how they're named for the 7 nerves exiting there. Then, once you get past that position, you name the nerves according to their superior vertebra. So, at some point, this was thought to be a good idea. Okay, so we see it here, C1, and there's a C8, even though there are only 7 cervical vertebrae. Remember, it's named for the inferior one. And so the C8 then is inferior, and then we transfer to the superior vertebra. Okay, so then it assumes the nerve that's exiting, so this would be the second thoracic, first thoracic, and this is the only place that there's kind of a weird alteration in naming. All right, we can see 8 pairs of cervical nerves in, 12 of thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 called the coccygeal, which we don't deal with too much. Okay, so let's look at the anatomy again. We have dorsal rootlets. Those are the ones carrying sensory information into the spinal cord. The dorsal root that feeds those rootlets. The dorsal root ganglion. So this is where a bunch of cell bodies are going to be at. So your information these are typically unipolar types of neurons, so all the cell bodies are here, and you've got one extension heading out to the periphery, the other extension heading into the spinal cord. But this is where the cell body will be located. Over on the other side, we have the spinal nerves. It consists of mixed nerves, both sensory and motor components. We have the ventral rootlets that form the ventral root. This is conveying motor information from the anterior gray horn of the spinal cord. This is the setup of a nerve. Looks very similar to what a muscle bundle looked like, and sure enough, the terminology is very different, except for in the case of muscles, we call this the epimysium, but in the case of nerves, it's called the epineurium that surrounds an entire nerve, the perineurium that surrounds a fascicle, and then the endoneurium that surrounds a specific single axon. So the general anatomy of nerves, right? We're talking about sensory or afferent nerves. These are the ones that carry information from the receptors into the CNS. The motor or efferent nerves carry signals from the CNS to muscles and glands. And then we've got the spinal type of nerves, the mixed nerves, that conduct signals in both directions and have both afferent and efferent fibers. You can break each of these down into somatic or visceral components and general or special. And you can see a summary of those here, but don't get too wrapped up on those details. I won't test you on that specific amount of information. I'll tell you exactly what you need to know about this in the review.